Thanks again, Holly, for hopping on to another episode of Untapped Stories. So I love to start these conversations off just by, before we get into your day-to-day, the business you run now, and the sports nutrition side, just going all the way back to young Holly, because I know you work sort of in sports now. But what were sports like growing up for you as a young athlete, and maybe how did that shape the path you eventually wound up on to build your own business?
Yeah, so I grew up in a big soccer household, and actually kind of like a big sports household. I'm the oldest of three girls, so I was the one who went to all the sporting events with my dad, because my other two sisters, they are athletic, but they didn't want any parts of going to any of the matches or games. Like I grew up going to like wrestling matches with my dad and soccer games, whether they were like high school soccer games or like, professional. So soccer was my primary sport for most of my life. I ended up picking up lacrosse probably like middle school, I guess is when we kind of picked it up. And then I played through high school as well. And I ended up actually playing club lacrosse in high school or in college at Westchester. Yeah, I had a it's kind of this weird story, but I had a neck injury during high school, and I was never a fan of heading the ball. And after my neck surgeries, I really wasn't a fan of heading the ball. I should have probably seen a sports psych. But 20 years ago, that wasn't as prevalent as maybe it is now. Like with everything in youth sports as well as professional and our weekend warriors, everything around sports and athletics has evolved, whether we're talking about like sports psych or nutrition. Yeah. So, in college, I definitely picked up running because I like to be active. So I would say now as a, 34-year-old, I love to move my body in any way, whether that's running, strength training, now my daughter is in soccer, which is really cool. So trying to let her do whatever sport that she likes, and just being active and outside, I think is really important. So, I think youth athletics, a lot of it was relationship building at that, back then, that's where I have a lot of my good friends from. And I never saw it as something like some professionals or semi-professional. I wasn't very competitive, but I was decent. But when we talk about like high school athletics, you have to have that
Seriously.
You have to want to like go to the next level. So I really did it for fun and connection and that sort of thing. So as a adult now, it's just fun to again just kind of get out and run with friends, do other things, be active. So
you run a sports nutrition business. How has that maybe shaped your perspective on youth sports? It sounds like, which I think most parents would agree with, it's a lot about fun, enjoying it. You can be competitive, but you still have to take the time to relish those opportunities as a kid. But how has it, from when you were growing up, not really knowing what you know now as a nutritionist, how has that shaped your opinion on youth sports in today's day and age?
There's so much that we can do to help youth athletes just feel better through proper fueling. I remember in high school, we would go to Wawa before a night game, and we would get the worst food, all the junk food, and eat it all. And I have a pretty my stomach doesn't get upset, so I guess that's a perk. And I could literally eat whatever I wanted. But I was probably could have felt even better if I knew even the foundational things. I grew up in a well-educated family and whatever, and a good high school, but I didn't talk to a dietitian at all. Nobody talked to us about nutrition. I think the only thing that I remember in high school was during health class doing the My Plate or the My Pyramid, right? Yep. So I had a little bit of everyday nutrition, but nothing when it comes to sports nutrition. And I played club, I played travel, I didn't just play for school. So I think there's such an opportunity to educate, inform, and empower our youth athletes to choose not a better, but the best option for their sport, whether they're out, whether they have to pack snacks. And it doesn't have to be really complicated. When we're talking about semi-professional, professional athletes, we have to fine tune things.
Yeah.
But when it comes to youth athletics, we really just need to work on the foundations of eating and eating enough and what things what's the difference between a carbohydrate, a protein, a fat? When do we want to eat these things as it relates to our activity and our sport? So I think there's just like such a room for information and education in youth athletics.
And what would you say maybe one of the biggest things that youth athletes can take today? Because a lot of our audience is parents and young athletes, and they want to know, again, they're not going to have 5 nutritionists on staff as if they're playing in the NBA or the NFL. But like, if you're a young athlete, middle school or whatever it is, what are some tips that maybe the high pro athletes or even like college level athletes seeing that they're doing that the young athletes and middle schoolers can take when it comes to nutrition?
Eating enough is really hard for very active high schoolers, and middle schoolers. I say nutrition should almost feel like a part-time job because eating should feel like, oh my gosh, I'm eating again. Like that means you're doing it right, because there's two goals that are your body's trying to do, right? It's trying to grow, between the ages of 12 and 20, right? And 20 plus, we're growing during these years, and we're trying to meet our fitness and sport goals. So you need a lot of calories to do both of those things successfully. An example of how I see, a high schooler under eating in ways that they actually don't realize it is they have like a bar for breakfast. They might bring something for a snack. And then they have like the standard school lunch, which is usually not big enough. It doesn't have enough carbohydrates for most of our active players or active high schoolers. And then they go right to practice not eating. And then maybe they even have a second practice, or they go to stretch lab, or they go to one-on-one training. They do something. So then they get home at 8:00 and like they've had a lunch, a snack, and maybe, like a bar for breakfast. So it's really trying to front load, and like, I know we always talk about like breakfast is the most important meal. Well, for our youth athlete, it is really important because they're so active, whether it's in school, they're walking all around, and then they do like 2+ hours of training in the afternoon. So, can they get a little bit of something in the morning? Okay, if they're doing a bar, can they get one of the Fairlife drinks? Can mom, dad, parent, whoever, make a smoothie for them to drink in the morning? Can we do dry cereal? Like, can we just get a little bit more nutrition? Can we do trail mix? Can we do, and I'm naming things that are very like dense, that give us a lot of bang for our buck when it comes to calories and nutrition. And you are going to get some pushback from your child, right? Because they're going to be like, it's 6:45. I'm not hungry. I barely want to get out of bed. If we're especially talking about high schoolers, not the easiest to wake up. So it's all about like moving the needle. Is like, okay, maybe you give them like half a cup of Cheerios, and then like the next week you try to do a cup of Cheerios. So it's just trying to like getting them more and more used to eating in the morning so that they feel better in the morning, and also packing snacks for during the day, and trying to see also hopefully their school allows for it, and asking those questions about like, okay, when can we eat this snack? What can we do? And even packing more for lunch. Like if they buy lunch, can they bring some pretzels? Can they bring a granola bar? Can they bring an apple? Like what else can we add on to that school lunch that's going to, bolster it up a little bit? So we're not putting so much pressure on dinner. And dinner for these athletes could be 7-8 o'clock, and then we're asking them to like go to bed an hour later,
and
or we're like
somewhere in between.
Exactly. So we have this expectation. They're like, oh, you need your sleep, we need your sleep recovery, but we're also asking them to eat this huge meal at 8 p.m.
It's a lot.
So I almost just, we can talk about this with adults too. It's just like swinging some of the nutrition more during the day. But I find this really, it's a challenge, and honestly, it's an art, not a science, right? Just kind of working with the athlete about like, okay, maybe they like applesauce pouches, so do we pack a couple of those, or any of these like fruit pouches that are really easy to eat, and they're whole food. So I like that too, not just so many like bars and drinks and that sort of thing. So that's one of the biggest barriers for our youth athletes.
No, it makes sense. And actually, I heard I think it was a podcast interview the other day. It was a guy named TJ Watt. He's a defensive lineman for the Steelers. He was telling somebody that when he was younger, his parents were super high on nutrition. I guess they knew 20, 30 years ago, but his dad would make him 2 dinners. He would have the school lunch, but his parents would pack him his own lunch. And then for breakfast every day, it was a 5-egg omelet. But that him and his brother are both like 6'6", 260 NFL players. So it's like, it makes sense. Like, parents, probably big people. They had the kid fed well throughout the day. But I guess the hardest part for that, though, and the question I want to ask is, when it comes to young athletes, it sounds like somebody like a TJ Watt, from what he was saying, understood that in high school, and he was into it, and he like wanted to do it with his parents. How do you get an athlete who, maybe you as the parent or you as the guardian, you know they should be eating better and prioritizing nutrition, but the kid just doesn't want to do it? How do you break through to them and make that mindset change that nutrition is very important?
The analogy or the metaphor that people always use is like, you need gas for your car, right? So like, if you plan to do all this exercise and you're asking so much of your body, we need to be able to like give it gas so it runs. And I always think of like, even when we have like these mini meals, it's like kind of going, if we have like a granola bar for breakfast, it's like filling up the tank to like a fourth of a tank.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like it's just kind of giving your body like a little bit. And then you're going to have to go back to the gas station a little bit later and like get a little bit more. So, you know, getting on their level and saying, okay, like, what are your goals? You know, I think we can do this with any child, or, you know, whether they're 10 or 20, it's like really having a conversation with them of like, okay, this is your goal. You want to play college, you want to play pro, like whatever your goal is. Nutrition is one of those things that can be the 1%. And I think in youth athletics, it can be like the 20%. Like there is so much that we can do when it comes to nutrition. And like I said, just like foundationally, like, can we get enough? So asking them, you know, going to like, as an Eagles fan, it pains me to say this, but like Tom Brady and like what he did, right? And like what he talks about, or, you know, that Steelers player, and be like, okay, this is what the pros do.
Yeah.
You know, like there was some crazy statistic that was like the Kansas City Chiefs ate 75,000 Uncrustables last year.
Yeah, I think I remember saying
or something,
that.
Right? Because I mean, a football player or a soccer player might eat 5 a day because they're very easy to digest and absorb. They give good energy, and people also, the athletes feel comfortable eating them. So that's the other thing that's like, we find our like tried and true meals that we feel good eating on, you know, and it doesn't affect our performance. So, you know, meeting the athlete where they are with everything, you know, they're not going to be eating that, you know, 5-egg omelet tomorrow, probably. So like realistic expectations, and just having a conversation with them about, you know, like, what are your goals? And I think this can help. And asking them like, where can they start? You know, and we work with athletes, we have this table that has 6 different boxes. It has carbs, protein, fats, fruits, veggies, calcium, and fun foods. And I have the athlete write down what kind of carbohydrates they like. Obviously, I give them examples, but it's like they write pasta, bread, rice, whatever it is. They write it down. So when we're building our plates, they can go to their list of foods that they like, and then they have the autonomy to choose what they like. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, versus like me coming up with an idea for them. It's being like, okay, what do you like? And how can we add that in?
I think that's the most important part. And we've seen that with whether it's training, nutrition, the mentality, you have to get the buy-in from the athlete first. You can't just, you know, force it on a kid with whatever you're doing, because that's always going to have pushback. I guess on that, though, I know maybe one of the more sensitive topics, I don't know if it's as prevalent, but I've heard it a lot for younger male athletes, but for younger female athletes. How do you break the stigma that, like, you know, eating so much food is not a bad thing for you if you are an athlete? Because even my wife played college soccer, and she said that she felt that a little bit in high school. Like, there's, because you have to do it for sports, a pressure to lift, a pressure to eat a lot of protein and like get stronger. But how do you break that down for young female athletes that it's actually a good thing, and you have to, you know, eat a certain amount to stay, you know, like in shape and to keep the energy up for your sport, when maybe society sometimes tells you that's not what, you know, people your age should be doing?
I think that's really hard when they have athlete friends. I have like cross country runners that have like, again, like somebody who does not do athletics, and they have to eat a lot more than, so, you know, I have cross country runners that are running 30, 40 miles a week in high school. You know what I mean? So like they are
gotta fuel for that.
They're eating so, and like that can be really uncomfortable for somebody to like, go out to dinner and they want like the pasta and meatballs and their
Exactly.
counterpart has a salad, right?
Yep.
Naming it and really having those conversations with your athlete, your child, about like, okay, like, how does that make you feel? And I know that's really like warm and fuzzy, but really trying to like talk about kind of like that disordered eating mentality that like we always think about, like lighter is better and lighter is faster, right? Well, actually we know like strength is the most important thing. So let's try to get you stronger.
Yep.
and not so much about like leaner is better. And also being like, they don't always have to have like what mom and dad are eating. Your 15-year-old who's in the middle of puberty that is active all day long their plate is going to look different than yours.
Yeah.
So allowing them, like, if you're doing the bean pastas or like, your low carb pastas, your student athlete needs to be eating like the regular pasta.
Yeah.
So and like
No, it's true.
they don't need the protein bars. They just need real food. Like, we don't always have to focus so much on like all like the bars and things that like there are different like phases of life, right?
Yeah.
So like we have different goals. So, even I've seen, mom or dad has high cholesterol, high blood pressure. So like the house is like relatively low sodium, versus if I have a high school soccer player playing in the middle of July and he sweats a lot, he needs more sodium.
Yeah.
Like, so if we're getting a lot of cramps, like if your athlete is in pain, can't be playing soccer, or like keeps getting cramps, has to be pulled out, they might actually need more sodium. It's actually not potassium. Yeah, sodium is the main thing that we lose in sweat, the main electrolyte that we lose in sweat. And so if like the house is relatively low sodium, food isn't being cooked with sodium, that could be something that we look into. But I say, yeah, trying to get ahead of the disordered eating, because it is everywhere. It's in the locker rooms, it's with friends, it's on social media, and having the conversation about like, sometimes it doesn't resonate as much about like, there are different types of dogs and there are different types of like human bodies. Like, there's a Chihuahua and there's a Great Dane, right? Like everyone has different genetics. Sometimes that doesn't really resonate, but you could use it as an example. You could, again, reframe their goals about, what is your goal? And we know that underfueling is the biggest risk factor for stress fractures. So if you want to stay injury free, we need to be eating enough so that your body doesn't get a stress fracture.
And what about for those parents who absolutely know that and the athletes who know it too? Say if you're making your ideal shopping list, whether you're actually going to Costco or going to the grocery store, what are some easy, quick wins that parents and kids can grab? And you mentioned a couple of times, maybe bars or like getting a lot of sodium. So it's just like a certain type of drink people can get. Like what's, without having to, really increase your grocery bill and go crazy with spend, what are some easy, quick wins that parents can have in the house that they can just, stuff in the basement, stuff in the closet, and kids can grab and grow to stay fueled out throughout the day?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I always think about differentiating like sports nutrition and everyday nutrition. So when we think about like fiber rich foods, like some of my favorite snacks are like any of like the roasted bean snacks, because they have fiber, they have protein, two things that sometimes our athletes aren't eating enough of, and adults aren't either. I don't want them also having that roasted bean snack right before practice, because the protein and fiber is going to make them sluggish, right? So if we think about the sports nutrition side of this, like things that we can have on hand for before, during, after sports, any of like your Greek yogurt products, whether it's like, a single serve Greek yogurt, or any of like the drink, like the Chobani drinks, or the Too Good yogurt. That's great because it has protein, it has calcium, it has the probiotics that are so helpful. Any of like your Fairlife drinks are good as well, or like this like ultra filtered milk. I have one, actually, I don't know the name, but I just got them at Costco, and they taste pretty good. What are they? Nuri? So it's again like kind of like a yeah, one of my clients told me about it, so I was like, well, I'll go get it. It was at Costco. It's in a can, so it's Nurri. It's similar to Fairlife. So
that's like 30 grams of protein, by the way?
Yeah.
Wow, in one drink, that's crazy.
And it's not a protein powder, which is what I like, especially for athletes, youth athletes, because protein powder doesn't give us the the food matrix that a naturally occurring protein would. So in this drink, there's naturally occurring protein, there's naturally occurring calcium, and that our body absorbs at a better rate than, manufactured product. So any of these single serve things can be really great for like on the go. Yeah. They can pack, they can have afterwards or in between, like a school practice and a club practice, like utilizing that. The applesauce pouches are great. If we're thinking of like bars for like on the go, I love the Nature's Valley, like the oats and honey one is great. It's very messy, I understand. Eat it outside.
Those are crumbly.
Yeah, but they're primarily carbohydrates and oats, so which is great for a practice snack or in between two practices. What else? Fruit snacks are also great for right beforehand, or because again they're like quick carbohydrates, or any like those fruit leathers, like the think thin bars. But really when they're at home, if they can have things at home, really leaning into different types of fruits. So, grapes, bananas, apples, berries, oranges, whatever, have that so easily accessible, because we know fruits and veggies, they give us fiber. Fruits also give you more carbohydrates, which that's really what our athletes need, are more carbohydrates. They give you the vitamins and minerals that can help. The antioxidants in those vitamins and minerals help reduce the stress that exercise puts on the body. We think of exercise as like this good stressor. Our body doesn't know the difference between like good stress and bad stress. It just knows stress. So if we can try to get as many antioxidants in through our diet, through fruits and veggies, that could be a plus. So having all those things on hand, having a frozen fruit is a great option. They can do smoothies, do like a magic bullet, like teach them how to make a smoothie for after school, or, if they need a bedtime snack, like if they, are trying to get more protein, they are trying to build muscle, doing like an evening snack can always be helpful. We can make a smoothie. So use frozen fruit is always a great option. Most people should be having 5 servings of fruits and veggies a day.
I don't hit that, so.
Yeah, it's hard. It is hard. So like having some of these very accessible ways of like, whether it's dried fruit, frozen fruit, fresh fruit, whatever it is. I know our family eats more of the fruit if I like wash it and cut it.
Yeah, if it's like perfectly cut up for the
kids. It's
always like that.
Right? And you can get one of those like fun snack boxes or whatever to like, so they can visually see it. So if they're like, I want a snack, and you're like, go in the fridge, and they're like, they open it up and they're like, oh, what am I eating? I don't know. But if you have this like fun little snack box, like when I took it out for my kids, they were like thrilled. Any of those options.
So what about in maybe switching from like day-to-day nutrition, you have a practice, whatever it is. What about game day for young athletes? What are some tips that young athletes can do on game day, whether it's before a big game, meal prep, or even, I think a lot of parents and athletes want to know, what about like in game? Should you always have, and I'm not that we're sponsored by these people, but like a Gatorade on stock, like next to you on your bench, or what kind of like drink should you have to keep yourself fueling? Because I think people know they can carb up a lot days before a game, and maybe it's the old school mentality, but that game day itself, what can athletes do to stay energized and make sure they're playing their best?
If we have 3 to 4 hours before the start of the game, I want somebody to have like a balanced meal. So that could look like, if it's, you have a 12 o'clock game, at 8 o'clock, you can have a couple pieces of toast, throw some peanut butter, have a couple eggs, have a piece of fruit. That could, have some carbs, protein, fats, and a little bit of produce. If we only have like 2 hours to the game, then you really want to focus on more carbohydrates. So maybe in that sense, we get rid of you don't need the eggs, and you could do like 2 slices of toast with peanut butter and maybe a banana. So as we get closer to the game, we want to decrease the protein, decrease the fat, and decrease the fiber, and increase the carbs. So
does it matter what kind of carbs though? Because if like that's the one, I would think carb, you eat a bowl of pasta 2 hours before a game, but that might put a kid to sleep.
Yeah.
Maybe, I think I could be wrong with that, but what kind of carbs should you shoot for 2 hours before a game?
You can lead more towards like the simple carbohydrates. So, and it depends on the person's stomach. So if they have like a sensitive stomach, also if they get really anxious around the game, then we might want to go with like a white bread or a white bagel. And also having like their tried and true thing, like this is what they do every day or every day before a game, right? And then they feel better clear about,
Yeah,
you know,
new
like,
routine.
I know this bagel with peanut butter isn't going to upset my stomach. So if they have about 2 hours,
Yeah.
you could do like a mini meal that's high carbohydrate. So you could do a wheat or a white product depending on digestion. Throwing also in like 6 to 8 ounces of orange juice can be helpful because that can get in a little bit more carbs without having to eat something. And orange juice, apple juice doesn't have any fiber. And then if we have like an hour toward the game, I'm looking at like straight carbohydrates. So that could be like one of those oats and honey bars or like the Nature Valley bars. You could just do like a banana and a little bit of peanut butter. You could do one of those fruit leathers. You could do a couple handfuls of pretzels, like that sort of thing. But I hope that like mini, like that snack, like 1 hour before the game, that hopefully is not the first. I don't want that to be the first time they're eating. You know, that can be almost like a top off. Like if they had something at 8, all right, I want them to have a snack at, 11:30 before they start warming up. During the game, if it's like moderate temperatures, if they're not sweating a lot, water is fine. I would rather them do water than an electrolyte drink. What we need during exercise, we need carbohydrates, we need sodium, and we need hydration. So those 3 things are what we look at. Carbohydrates can come from like an applesauce pouch or oranges, grapes, or whatever kind of like at halftime. Like even like pretzels are a great option because they have the sodium. We have to really know like how much they sweat. If they're not sweating a lot, they're not losing sodium. Like we talked about sodium being the main electrolyte lost in sweat. Their sodium needs aren't going to be that high. So they can just do water. They don't need all this extra sodium.
But if it's a 90-degree day in August and you're playing 90 minutes of soccer, then
Correct.
maybe grab some pretzels.
Yeah, you can do pretzels and a Gatorade for sure. And you could do a G2 versus like a full strength Gatorade. Yeah, so we always think about those 3 things, the carbs, hydration, and sodium. And let's look at, with our youth athletes, sometimes we don't always have to supplement with sodium. But yeah, water, I would choose that most of the time unless it's like really warm and or they're out for a long time. Like we're talking 90 minutes, like an extent, it's over an hour is kind of where we think about using a drink.
I think a lot of those athletes too, at least that are in the athletes Untapped world, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and it's fun too for the kids, but a lot of people nowadays, summer tournaments, spring they'll play like 4 or 5 games a day in hot weather. So I think having those little tips on hand for parents, just have a bar, have pretzels, have orange juice, because if you're playing maybe one high school game every couple nights and you play 20, 30 minutes a game, sounds like water could work there. That'd be fine. But if you're playing for like 5 hours a day, high-level competition, running around like crazy, having fun, I think you need a little bit of an extra kick just to make sure you don't fully fall flat in your face.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I also love soft pretzels because they're high in sodium and high in carbohydrates and they're dense. So, and usually they're easy to, digest. So if you have a soft pretzel in between your 2 games, make sure you get enough water.
It's funny, as the coach sometimes, I'll see all of our kids eating soft pretzels and I'm like, you guys need that, but I don't need that at 8:30 a.m. Like,
I know.
I'll skip that one.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's 60 grams of carbohydrates in one. Okay, good to know. Like
I'm sitting on the bench. You guys are running, so you have it. I'll stick to my banana and coffee the entire time.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a lot of good feedback already, but what about maybe one nutrition myth that you think is out there that parents and athletes believe, or going back 20, 30 years, you were always told kind of like, like protein is the end all be all or whatever it is? What do you see a lot of your patients or clients, whatever you want to call them, come into you and ask like, hey, Holly, I think I should be doing X, but you really know from what you've studied and how far nutrition's come in sports over the last 20, 30 years that that mindset might not be right.
Oh gosh, there could be so many things. So many. I was like thinking about this. Well, the one thing that we kind of already talked about is like the leg cramps, like that we think like leg cramps come from lack of potassium. It's usually not. It's sodium. So I know we're kind of like almost out of that season, but if your athlete is having consistent like leg cramps, then it's likely related to sodium losses and not potassium.
Interesting. How can you get a quick jolt of sodium? Sodium like tablets? I remember those kind of being around in high school and college. Or do you prefer?
Yeah, you could. In the moment, you could do like a Gatorade or a Noon or a liquid IV. But I always think about like, how can we prepare for this better? And that like, okay, if we know that you keep getting these leg cramps, I need you to have more sodium the day before the tournament. So if you have a Saturday, Sunday tournament, almost like Thursday, Friday, we're like hyperhydrating, or like we're adding in more sodium. Maybe we're doing like a soup. We're doing, Asian food. So we have like the soy sauce on there. We're adding salt to things. So I call it like hyperhydrating. So we're doing that Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday during the tournament, we're doing Gatorade, we're doing soft pretzels, we're doing saltier things. We're adding salt to like whatever it is. So we can kind of get ahead of it and getting enough hydration too.
So anytime you're watching college sports or pro sports and somebody's cramping on the field, you probably automatically think like, just not enough sodium. If only they knew.
Because it's their sweat losses, right? Well, that's like, you hope to not see that, because you know that like, as a dietitian, I'm like, really? Like
it's an obvious one to avoid.
Couldn't have gotten ahead of this one. Like I can't think of any examples right now, but I'm a big soccer fan, so like the shooters that people can take if they have a cramp. Oh my gosh, I'm like drawing a blank of what they call it. But there is something potentially. I listen to way too much soccer media that like I've learned the names for these things, but I feel like that's like a one that I heard growing up. But more so now, it's like the love for protein, right? That most of the time we're getting enough protein. Especially our athletes are getting enough protein. Maybe it's if you have a vegan or vegetarian athlete, or an athlete that really doesn't like meat or dairy, then okay, those athletes might have a harder time. But most of the time, if they're consuming dairy and any animal products, they're meeting their protein needs. They probably are not meeting their carbohydrate needs or their vitamins and minerals. So I would really make sure, are we eating enough carbs? Are we eating enough fruits and veggies to get the antioxidants, to get the fiber? That's so important for just like overall health as well. That they're probably getting enough protein.
One particular question, I know it's kind of a hot topic nowadays, but when I was growing up and playing sports, I liked to eat PB&Js. I thought they were an easy snack, but then I heard some nutritionists and maybe people on my team saying it wasn't the best thing for you, either like on a game day, because I think the jelly with a lot of sugar. What's your thought on a PB&J? Is it a thumbs up, thumbs down?
Oh, it's like a 2 thumbs up. Like, yes, okay. The sugar is what we need. Like, and that's because what happens is like if we eat that an hour before, our body takes those carbohydrates, they break it down into glucose. That glucose gets into the bloodstream, and then the athlete can utilize the glucose for energy. Like they're utilizing it right away. Like we want sugar. Yeah, so it's, yes, PB&J all the way. Like, you saw who had it was the Eagles that had the delay just like last weekend.
Yeah.
Right? And they said that they deliver like hundreds of Uncrustables. Like, if our professional athletes are eating Uncrustables, they are fine. They are good.
Because there's something I heard, maybe you can help people debunk this, because it might have come full swing, and I'm not as tuned into the sports nutrition world, but I remember when I was younger, the Golden State Warriors were really, they're still okay, but they were a powerhouse in the 2010s. And I remember an article saying that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, they loved eating PB&Js. Like, they would take them on the planes, but their nutritionist for the Warriors would always say, guys, you can't eat PB&Js. Please steer it in another direction. And it was kind of like a funny fight all season. Like, if they ever got a win, they could eat a PB&J. Why would a high-level nutritionist, like, what would they think is wrong with the PB&J for a pro athlete? Because there's got to be something where it's not like everybody loves it,
So, pre-game and intra-game, great idea. But a PB&J does not give you adequate amount of protein for recovery. So you would want like the PB&J plus chocolate milk, or a PB&J plus one of these protein drinks, or a PB&J plus a yogurt. So from a recovery standpoint, a PB&J gives you 5. It depends on the bread, but like anywhere between 5 and 10 grams of protein, which is we want 20, 30, 40 grams for those, basketball players, they're looking like 40 grams of protein. Your athlete probably want like around 20 plus. So yes, from a recovery standpoint, peanut butter and jelly is not a great option. It is for the carbohydrates in it, but it doesn't have the protein. So But before a game, as a quick source of carbohydrates, and like during, like at halftime, that is a great option. Yeah, so I'm glad you asked.
I'm super glad I asked him that too, because I was gonna just maybe leave the call thinking like, well, Holly said PB&Js were good, so you can eat them whenever. But pre-game, in-game, that makes the most sense after game. So it sounds like, I mean, there's no, like you said, it's not a science, it's an art. But if you're gonna tell a young athlete one thing in like a 30-minute session, that sounds like pre-game and everything you do before you play, maybe a little bit of in-game. Carbs, keep up your sodium so you're not sweating it out too much. And then post-game, I mean, carbs are good, but you have to get protein in post-game. Is that like a very simple breakdown, or is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so before we focus on carbs, a little bit of protein and fluids, and then afterwards, you still need carbohydrates, but really focusing on that protein post for like from a recovery standpoint is really important. Like within the hour, especially for high school athletes, because if they get past an hour, they dig themselves into a calorie deficit hole, and it's very hard to get out of it. So, really trying to get something in within an hour, and then they can follow it up with like an actual meal, a couple hours after that. Most high school athletes should be eating something every 3 hours.
I remember we knew some of this back in the day for high school, but there was a couple of teachers at the high school that I went to that wouldn't even let you have like a water or a Gatorade on the desk.
Crazy.
And it's like, just let the kid hydrate. They're playing sports and they're trying. They could be doing way worse things with their time. So.
Yeah. Oh, I know. That's that's one of the questions I ask the athlete and the parent in like an initial consult. It's like, what is your high school like rules? What's the bathroom situation like? Will you go to the bathroom? Because will you drink? Like,
no, it's a real thing.
Yeah. I mean, talking about like, what are your teachers like? How can you go to the bathroom in the nurse's office? Like, because again, if they're going into the practice at 3:00, completely depleted and dehydrated, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah. And I remember, not to tangent too far, but for my high school, we would eat whatever we wanted before school, but it was pretty strict. You didn't really get any break besides lunch. Mm-hmm. So at that point, it's like, when are you going to spot time to either have to use the bathroom or take a break or eat more food? So you're trying to eat like walking to a class. It's just like, I think you forget as an adult how hard it can be as a high school athlete. Maybe middle school early, it's a little bit different because it's a little more relaxed when you're 6th, 7th, 8th grade. But once you get to high school, if it's a good school, competitive, whatever it is, like they usually have you locked on academics. So it's hard to find that time to really like fuel up, make sure that you're on track with your your nutrition goals. And it's funny to say, but like even go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you spot 10, 15 minutes if you're supposed to be in class? Right. Because then a teacher's mad that you're leaving. So
it's all of these things that like
you have to kind of work through it.
Yeah. Well, our initial assessments or appointments are an hour, and people are like, "All right, no way can I talk for an hour." I'm like, "Oh, we can. We can talk for even longer than an hour, but I'll only keep it an hour because it's just like all these nuances, like what actually happens from like a day-to-day standpoint, where we can kind of." Where can we get past the barriers that happen, on a daily basis? Yeah.
Maybe my last question, Holly, I love asking this one, and it's tailored differently to whoever we're talking to, but I think for you it hits home perfectly. So I mentioned TJ Watt before and some high-level athletes who have spoken out about nutrition and how it was important to them early as a young athlete. Another example was Christian McCaffrey, running back for the 49ers. I saw an interview or podcast about him talking about his dad who played high-level sports and how strict he was in a good way with nutrition, the way he even, like, what he wore to school. Like, he wouldn't let him wear baggy pants because maybe it weighed him down more, so he wanted him to be more relaxed. Like, there are some parents who know this stuff. Maybe it's instinctively or they played sports, and they can teach it to their kids. Maybe what would you tell parents and athletes who don't know that, and like what's a success story maybe following that you've seen from one of your athletes where they came in not really understanding everything about nutrition, they knew it was important, and then through working with you and your team, they actually either got better at the sport or wound up playing better or felt better? What's a really good success story you can point to so athletes should take this seriously?
I had one athlete, the one that I honestly keep referring to about the cramps in the middle of in the summer. He had just torn his ACL. It was his sophomore year of high school. And he had just come back from ACL recovery, and he really wanted to, like, one, not hurt it again, and two, like, build muscle and play good because he almost felt like he was like down or behind. So, and he knew nothing about, I think his dad was from Mexico. So he had his like thoughts about like how he grew up playing soccer. I think his dad actually played semi-professional.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was just like, it comes from like education, and like we have a ton of handouts that are like, okay, like this is why we love carbohydrates, and this is why we eat them, before and during, and this is why we eat protein after. So I love giving the information and then having the athlete execute it, and like they take autonomy for it. And then they feel better, like for that soccer player, like his cramps went away. Like as soon as like we really targeted the cramp, because he was coming back from ACL injury, and like he had to be like pulled out from games, and his dad was mad, so there was like tension about that. Like his cramps are really bad, and it was hydration and sodium. So for that one, it was like a quality of life, because him and his dad weren't arguing anymore about like why was he cramping up in the middle of the game. And he was a center mid, so he was very good and a key part of his team. So once we nailed the sodium and hydration, like he didn't get any cramps, and that's awesome, because therefore his dad wasn't arguing or yelling at him, and also he was playing better and he was happy. So I will say that was my it's always like one of the best like success stories, that like we just had him feeling so much better, just kind of nailing the hydration and sodium aspect.
That story, maybe bringing it full circle for the audience, going all the way back to what you said at the beginning. Nutrition isn't going to be the full 100%. You still have to be a skilled athlete, train, work hard in your sport, but it could be the 1 to maybe even 20% for young athletes. Like if they don't take that seriously, lack of energy is a real thing on game day. And again, like you said, it could lead to cramps. It could lead to injury too if you don't have the proper nutrition. Because if you're not fueled, you're not playing your best, you're not strong enough to, so your body's not strong enough to support itself through a competitive game. I mean, that's where you get into trouble. So I hope parents realize that for young athletes, it's a full picture. It's training, it's making sure that the athlete's mindset is good, but nutrition is a real part of that equation. So I think if young athletes know that wholeheartedly, they can all perform a lot better, and like you said, just be happier and play better too. Super cool. Honestly, Holly, this was awesome and informative. I can't wait to get it out. So thank you for the feedback, and thank you for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.